So now we've seen how to get data from our database. We want to now create items in the database. So I'm just going to add a button to the top of our index here, the product index. And this is just going to be an A tag. I'm using an A tag because there's actually a class in Bootstrap that makes this look like a button. So I'll set the class equal to btn and btn-primary. And that will just make it look like a button and then use this as the color. And usually for A tags we use the href, but in ASP.NET we actually use ASP-controller, and then we give it the name of the controller which we created called product, and then we use ASP-action, and this is the function inside the controller that we want to call. So we're going to call the create function here, and then for the text in here we'll just write create. And in the product controller we're calling this create function, but it doesn't exist, so we'll just create that quickly. So we'll do public iAction result and then create. And iAction result is basically the type of function we want to use for all of the functions in here. So now we want to use our create function, and here we'll just return a view. We're not going to do anything with the database here, we're just returning the view, and then we're going to create the object inside the view. So right now we don't have a create file in our product views page, our products view folder. And remember, because we named this function create, it's going to return a view called create since we didn't pass in a view name here. So let's just create the create view. And here we just want to add a model on top of product. And remember from the last video I said if we pass in something here we can use it as the model, but if we don't pass in anything here and we write model at the top, this is just going to be a blank model with nothing in it. So basically all the values in here are going to be null, and that's what we want since we're creating a new model here, or a new instance of the model. And in here we just want to put a form, and I'll set the class equal to form, which is another Bootstrap class. And for the method we just want to set that equal to post, and that's it. So the stuff we want to get inside our model is the ID, name and price, but we don't actually want the user to fill in an ID here, so we're just going to make that hidden. And we're going to do input, and we're going to say ASP-4, and now we're going to say what this is for. So in our model this is for the ID field, and this way of doing it basically handles, instead of saying type here, we say ASP4ID, and then we'll automatically set this input to the correct type for ID. So if we didn't do this, we'd have to use type is equal to number or something like that. But in ASP we can just do this quicker by using ASP-4 and then which parameter this is for in our model. And also there's one more thing we want to do here, which is we want to make this hidden. And then we want to add in H1 or H3 here, and we'll use this as a heading for our next input field, and that field we're going to call name, or we'll say product name. And then we'll add that input here, and then ASP4. We're going to set that to name, and we'll make one more here for the price. So this will be another input, and then ASP-4 will be the price. And right now we don't have a submit button here, but I just want to run this and see what it looks like. So now you can see we have this create button here, and then it takes us to this form. And these input fields are actually small. We want them to fill up the screen. So we're going to add some more bootstrap here just quickly. So the class we add is just form control, and that will make it look a bit better. So this looks good. We might want to add some more spacing here, but for now this is fine. And then we just want to add the submit button down here. So we want to use input, and this time we do need to fill out the type. And we want to say the type is submit, and we don't want to give this a name, because what happens here is when you're submitting a form to send to a database, if you give this a name, this input will actually register as one of the things we're passing in. And obviously we don't have a submit thing in our database, so we don't want this to get passed in as a parameter. So for value here, this is going to be the value of what's written on our button. So we're going to say create here. And now if we save this, when we click this button, notice we put a method here, but we didn't put an action. So this is going to return it to the same function. So it's going to return it to this create function. But this is actually a get method of the create function. When we submit this, it's going to go to a post version of this function. So let's create that here. We'll add our data tag here. We'll say HTTP post, and then under this we'll create the post version of this function. And now we're going to HTTP post. We're handling the create function, and we're taking a parameter of product, and we're going to call it product, or we could call it obj here, just so we know what we're working with. And when we say the word product, we know we're talking about the type, not the variable. And here we just want to say if model state dot is valid. So this model state dot is valid, just make sure that this object is a valid object for our database. There's no errors in it or whatever before we pass it to the database. And if it is valid, we want to add it to the database. So we'll do underscore db dot products dot add, and then we'll pass in our object. And if that is added correctly, we now need to save our DB, because remember when we created those migration files. So when we created these migration files, it didn't just automatically add stuff to the database. It first made this migration file, and then if we were happy with what it did, we could say update database, and then it added these fields in. So the same thing happens here. when we add something to the database, it doesn't just automatically push it into the database. We need to do _db.savechanges. And now remember, we call this iActionResult. This is what we're returning. And we haven't returned any views or anything here. So down here, we want to return, and actually we'll do redirect. We'll redirect to action, and we'll call it the index action. So what's going to happen here? It's going to redirect to an action within this controller, and it's going to use the index one here. And that's just going to take us to the index page. And hopefully if that worked correctly, we should then see the new object that we added on our index page. But if for some reason something went wrong here and the model state is not valid, we need to return something. So we'll do return not found, or we'll do not found. So this is just an error. It's going to say not found basically. And if we run this, everything should be working right now. So we'll go to products, and then we'll do create. And for our name here, we'll say this is the batch, and it costs 52.99. And here, if you look, this create button is sort of overlapping here. So we want to add some CSS to that. But for now, let's just click on this. And we get some type of error here. So I've just paused the recording there to figure out what the errors were. And there's actually two here. So in the create form, we don't need that hidden input field for ID, so I just removed that. And then here we forgot to say return. So on the HTTP post create function, we need to return the redirect to action. And now if we run this, it will work. But I've already created our second entry here, so let's just create another one. And we'll call this glove, and we'll set the price to 30,00. So now it's working. We added this new column, or this new row, to our database. And now that we have this create button working, we just want to fix this quickly because the style is really bad here. So we want to add the class of btn, and then btn-outline. We'll do outline primary, and we'll save this. Also, it was overlapping a bit, so we want to set the M margin on the y-axis to 3, and that will give it a margin on the top and the bottom of 3. So that looks a bit better. It just has the outline, and then when we hover over it, the color comes in. So this is all working correctly. In the next video, we'll look at deleting an item.